1960s, American soldiers were fighting communism in Vietnam. At home, some supported the war effort, while those who deemed the war unnecessary made their voices heard through protests and marches. During this time, outspoken leaders voiced their opinions and directed American culture towards social activism.
My name is Mary Beth Tinker. In 1965, when I was 13 years old and in 8th grade, some of us students in Des Moines, Iowa wore black armbands to school to mourn the dead in Vietnam and to call for a Christmas truce that was being proposed by Robert Kennedy.
In December 1965, some students, including the plaintiffs in the Tinker case, Mary Beth Tinker, her brother John Tinker, and their friend Christopher Eckert, made a plan to wear black armbands to school in order to protest the Vietnam War. Before they even wore their armbands to school, the principals found out and implemented an anti-armband policy. The students wore their armbands to school anyway, and the three were suspended for not complying with the policy. Mary Beth was in 8th grade, and John and Christopher were both in 11th grade, but they all attended different schools. The students challenged their suspensions in court. They lost in the district court, and in the Court of Appeals for the 8th Circuit, the judges split. The split meant that the district court's ruling was upheld. The Supreme Court then heard the students' case.
In 1969, the Supreme Court ruled that yes, students do have rights in the public schools.
The school district argued that the right to free speech is not absolute, that the armbands made the students think about the Vietnam War when they should have been thinking about school and were therefore distracting, and last, that rules must be enforced to ensure that a school can properly function. The students argued that the armbands were in fact not substantially disruptive, that earlier in the year students were not punished for wearing other politically symbolic items, and last, that schools are meant to be forums of learning and that controversial subjects are not avoidable.
How many were involved in this one?
Well, there were,
How many were wearing armbands?
well, there were 5 suspended
5.
for wearing armbands, Your Honor.
Well, were there any wearing armbands who were not suspended?
Yes, I think there were 2.
That makes 7. 7 out of 18,000. And the school board was afraid that 7 students wearing armbands would disrupt 18,000.
Essentially, the Tinker Standard is 2 questions. Does the student's speech cause a material or substantial disruption, and does it interfere with the rights of other students? If both answers are no, then the student's speech is valid. Some have argued that Tinker only applies to political and symbolic speech, while others have interpreted it to include all speech. However, since Tinker, other cases have limited its scope, complicating the judgment of student speech even further.
To fight for students' free speech today more than ever because there are so many issues in our world that need to be changed. And kids know what these are. If you just look around, whether it's war or the environment or poverty or racism, hunger, people talk about all different ones, or some kids really are upset about their dress codes, things like that. How are we going to change these things if we don't have the tools to do that, like the First Amendment, like the Bill of Rights?